Hello, good morning. Welcome everyone to the second part of the WEkEO training workshop focused on marine data. Today, as you know, we will have this debriefing session where you can ask questions about the Jupyter notebooks, the data that you use, and everything related to WEkEO and the marine data and problems that you could have found in the exercises suggested during the previous webinar. In order to recap what we have done before, or what materials do you have available for that, you can find in the YouTube channel of WEkEO the following videos. First, the recording of the previous session, where you have different experts talking about WEkEO, its functionalities, and Jupyter notebooks and the marine data itself. Then a video on the WEkEO Jupyter Lab environment, and other tutorials related to the harmonized data access, and 2 examples about marine data. So this session today has the following agenda. Sorry, I haven't presented myself before. I'm Marta Bertran. I'm moderating this session. And we will have the help from several WEkEO experts. On the first part, we will have Haley Evers-King, and she will answer the questions about the Jupyter Notebook environment, marine data, and so on. Laia Romero, also from the WEkEO team, she will help us answering these questions as well, both live. And then we will have also the help of Amin Al-Amrani, who is part of the WEkEO support team, and he will answer directly your questions in the chat. So you can ask your questions directly on the chat, and then we will answer both by the chat, or also through this session. Then we will have also, like, the second part that will be more focused on the cloud processing. And for that, we will have Joanna Migens from EUMETSAT, that she will help us with this part, answering this part of the questions, and also Laia Romero from Mercator Ocean. So where can you answer your questions? You can use the Google platform accessible from round 2. You can also ask the questions in the chat, as I said. And as I said before, there will be the experts from the WEkEO user support team that will help us also answering the questions through the chat. Some more additional information that might be useful for you to know is that this session is recorded, and the link will be available for you to watch it later. So it is a very good opportunity for you to ask the questions, because then they will be recorded and they will be available for more people to know this information. And also, you can also later on find the answers for questions that you could not have previously. Then we will collect all the answers and questions and have them published on the WEkEO website, or we will send a document to the participants. But the idea is that they will be available for everyone. And then we will leave the Jupyter notebooks available on the GitHub. For any further questions, any problems with your account, or anything that you think it's much more detailed for something that you find later on during the upcoming weeks, you can always contact the user support at support@wekeo.eu. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce you to Haley Evers-King from EUMETSAT. Just a moment, please. Hello, Haley. Good morning.
Morning, Marta. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody who's attending our webinar today. Thank you for taking part over the last couple of weeks. It's been a pleasure to hear your questions and see how you've been experiencing WEkEO.
Okay, so let's go first with your presentation.
Yeah, so we had various questions. Some of these were topics that were raised during the last webinar in the Q&A in the chat box, and then some which came through the Google form that we had that allowed you to ask your questions. So I've tried to just summarize a couple of key topics that came up. But of course, if you have specific questions about this, ask now in the chat, or you can also contact the WEkEO support, and often your queries, if they're about marine data, will come through to me or one of my colleagues as well. So one of the first questions that was asked both during the webinar a few weeks ago and was also subsequently asked on the Google form was, where could you find the code examples that I showed in my demonstration and in the YouTube videos that Marta mentioned. So just to remind everybody that that code is available on the GitHub site that you can see linked there, and the repository that you're looking for is the WEkEO Jupyter Lab repository. That contains all the code that we've used during this training session, and will also include code that comes from subsequent training sessions as well. So this is one worth keeping an eye on if you use GitHub regularly to look for updates. If you're interested in more than just the marine data, you'll see new things populating that repository in the coming months as we do more and more training. So you can keep using that, and you can always go back to it as well. So if you need a fresh version, or if you've changed lots of things and you want to go back to the original, you can use Git to do that. And on that note, well, just to remind you all that you can view the tutorial on YouTube as to how to clone that into the WEkEO Jupyter Lab environment itself if you need a refresher on that. Then we had a couple of errors that people were getting when they were trying to run the notebooks. One error that people had was this error that comes as a timeout. So it says in the error message that you get from Jupyter when you run your notebook that there's been a timeout, and usually this happens when some connection is lost between the notebook you're running and the kernel, which is the environment that runs Jupyter behind the scenes. And the best solution for this is just to restart your kernel. In the Jupyter environment, you'll see at the top there's various buttons, and under one of those is option to restart the kernel, and then you can rerun the script. Another error that somebody received was the local variable access token was referenced before assignment, which usually this idea of something being referenced before assignment in Python means that you're trying to run a piece of code that's looking for something that doesn't yet exist. And it's usually a hint that you've maybe missed part of the code as you've clicked through and run it. So in this case, it was either that somebody had not run the part of the code that set the WEkEO credentials during the running of the script. So in each script, you have to put in your own username and password, and then you have to run a couple of steps in order to get the token that you need to access the harmonized data access. If you haven't done that, then this error will occur when you try and then run your download, or you try and access the data further on in the script. So you have to just go back to the start and make sure you run those things in sequence. Another issue that can raise this error is if your token has expired. So each token for access only lasts an hour. So if if you're working on one of the Jupyter notebooks and you go away and grab a cup of tea or have your lunch and come back and then run it again from where you got to, you might find that the access has expired. And then at that point, you just have to go back and restart again and just run through those steps to make sure that it's up to date. If you've already downloaded the data, you won't have to do this because the data already exists. You can just move to where you're working with the scripts. Okay, Martha, can you move to the next slide?
Of course.
Thank you very much. This was a really interesting question as well, which is not so much about the Jupyter, but actually kind of about the harmonized data access and the data that's available on WEkEO as a whole. But I thought this was a really good one to raise in the discussion here. So one of our participants asked, how do I obtain a list of attributes I can use in order to subset data through the query system? Is there a minimum level I can subset to, e.g. can one just pull back a single day or hour of data? And there's not really a simple answer to this question. It very much depends on the exact data set that you're looking at. So these attributes, the temporal and spatial resolution, and in some cases even depth resolution, a number of products as well that are associated with a type of data set vary hugely depending on what you're looking at, whether you're looking at imagery that's coming on a daily basis from one of the Sentinel satellites, or you're looking at a merged product with a long time series, or you're looking at a model output. So you have to understand a little bit about the data you're using in order to know how you can subset it. So for all the data that's available on WEkEO, you can search it, and you'll have seen this in the when you use the data viewer on the portal. You can search it by things like time and area of interest, and that will tell you that there is data available from a product in this time and region that you're interested in. That occurs for all data. For level 1 and level 2 data, you can't then subset that normally by space and time. You can only download it in the dissemination unit, they call it, that the product is provided in. So for the satellite data, it's provided in either like a granule or a swath, depending on which satellite you're looking at level 1 and level 2. However, for gridded data, you can subset much more regularly. So you can take a smaller portion of it in time, space, depth, in variable in some cases, etc., because it's all regularly gridded. The satellite data at level 1, level 2 is not. It's designed to be, as kind of near real time, accurate to the day and time and space point as possible. So with the other data, it tends to be then more regularly gridded. So you can do that. Most of the information about these different parameters is available either just by looking at the data in the viewer. You can see a lot of it. And if you try and subset it, your options will come up, and then you'll know what you can do. So whether you can subset in space, in time, and via depth or product type, etc. But you can also get further information from each of the products, or about each of the products. Under the resources tab in data viewer, there's a little eye symbol, and if you click on that, there's then lots of links to where the data is held. Obviously, we have a very, very vast array of different data that we're using in WEkEO, and that then will take you to the specialist knowledge that you might need. So, for example, if you look for Sentinel-3, you'll find that it pings you back to the EUMETSAT website, where you'll find our handbooks, which explain to you what the different product dissemination units look like for Sentinel-3's instruments, for the ocean color, for the SST and the altimetry, for example. And this will help you get to grips with how you can chop and change and download your data in different ways. And of course, if you need any help specifically on this, you can always ping the support and email, and we can answer questions for you specifically about different products. Okay, thank you, Marta.
Okay, thank you, Hayley. Right now, we are going to move to the two questions that are being asked right now. So I'm going to add Laia to this conversation so that she can also help us with this. Hello, Laia. Good morning.
Hello, Marta and Hayley. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. So we are going now to move now to the questions, leaf questions. So we have some of them very specific, others more general. So I'm going to start with one that is very, very general, and I think that you can both answer that. Is WEkEO suitable for beginners?
We hope so. I would say yes. I mean, the thing with, I think, the remote sensing data is, you do sometimes have to learn a lot about it, but with tools that we have like WEkEO, combine, the things like the Jupyter notebooks, combined with the data all being relatively accessible through one place in the HDA, means that you can, as a beginner, quite rapidly get all the data you might need and use it in an environment to start working with it. So it's quite a steep learning curve. I'll admit that. I think that's true of working with any complex big data. But yeah, we're here to help you if you're a beginner to get to grips. So don't be too intimidated. Laia, do you want to add anything to that?
Nothing. Perfect.
Okay. So we're going to move to one more specific. So is this one? If you have a guide that have you a guide what Python libs must be installed for functioning of Jupyter notebooks for Windows and for Linux if one starts from scratch?
So I don't think we have this available at the moment, but I can tell you how to either find out yourself, or we probably will provide it shortly. I'd actually quite like to add this to our documentation on the GitHub. It will probably change as we add more and more notebooks, but in general, if you use the latest sort of Anaconda distribution of Python, which will include Jupyter. And if you then look at the top of each of the notebooks, it tells you what additional libraries we're importing. You can install those using the Conda environment. But I think it would be nice for us to add a list of these to our repository. So I'll put that on my to-do list.
Well, actually, we have like a second part of this question. I suppose this, like what you just said, answers the question, but then there's this specification, like something specific for WEkEO. Can this be available?
Yeah, this can be. So in that list we could give would be the ones that we are using. Generally, what we've done is use ones that are pretty common and quite standard throughout the remote sensing community, and sort of general ocean and big data science community. So we're using things that a lot of them already come within Anaconda distribution of Python. So if you use that, you'll be most of the way there. And then there's a few extras that we've requested to install because they're ones we know that we can use in our notebooks. But I can update the GitLab to, the GitHub to reflect this list.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have some more than a question, something that might complement what you are just saying. So I'm just gonna publish it and then we can discuss it anyway. So one of our users is saying that for these examples, he used the comment conda install JupyterLab, Xarray, NumPy, Matplotlib, Cartopy, NetCDF, scikit image, XML to dict. So can you explain us a little bit more about it? In which context can we use this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is exactly what I was talking about when I said, if you install Anaconda, so you can go to the Anaconda website, you can use that to put Python on your computer. You'll get a similar environment to what we have on our JupyterLab, but just on your local computer. You can then adapt that environment by using this command that you see here. So when you have conda install, it's something you type in the command prompt for your own computer, and then that tells Anaconda, please go and look for these packages I'm interested in and install them on my computer. And the list that you've got there are ones that we are using here. For example, Xarray, NumPy, Matplotlib, Cartopy, NetCDF4. These are all ones that are very commonly used in this community doing ocean satellite science data and modeling. And that's how you would install them, basically. Some of them in that list, I don't think you necessarily would need to install. So I think, for example, Matplotlib, I think maybe comes with the Anaconda distribution as standard, so you might not need to install that, but Cartopy certainly doesn't, for example. This is a mapping library that allows you to make the plots that we've used in our notebooks. So what I will do is provide some guidance in the GitHub that tells you how to do this. But of course, all this is ready and installed for you on the JupyterLab on WEkEO, so you don't actually need to do any of this if you're already on there. And if you've got a virtual machine as well, we can help set that up for you. So.
Exactly. That was the one thing I was going to highlight, that if you are connecting directly to JupyterLab online, then you don't need to worry about any of these. Mm-hmm. And if you're working from a virtual machine, these are actually some of the tools that are available from WEkEO. So this can be pre-installed in your machine. But let us know if you have any question regarding this.
Okay, thank you. We have another one that is more general, but it's also asking about the coding. How much, or is it a little bit of coding enough to use WEkEO and to work with these Jupyter notebooks?
Yeah, I would say you probably need to know at least a bit to get started. It definitely helps. I mean, in general, with using this kind of data, the more programming you know, the more stuff you're going to be able to do with the data. What we've done with these notebooks is try and help. So even if you don't know much about using code, you can get started and you can see some examples and build from there. And, we hope to build kind of this knowledge base around these tools over time. But really to get the most out of things like the Harmonized Data Access API and to use your virtual machines fully, knowing a little bit, at least to get started, is very beneficial. You can still, of course, just use the interfaces on our website, like the data portal and viewer. Those are a graphical user interface, so you don't need to know how to code in order to just get some data from there and have a quick look at it. But if you really want to get stuck in and use the resources and all this data to its full capacity, then yeah, learning a bit of code is a good idea.
Okay, thank you, Haley. Is there something, Laia, that you would like to add to this? Fine.
No, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Then we have a specific question about the examples. So The question is about a problem that with the kernel that appeared, that the kernel is restarting. So most of the time I can access the data, but when I try to create the graphs, I get kernel restarting and the session dies. This happens with the ocean examples, chlorophyll and marine heat waves.
Yeah, this can happen. This is something that can happen a lot actually in the Jupyter environment in general, whether you're using it on your own computer or in a hosted environment. You have to keep an eye on things like your memory usage. You can see that in the bottom corner of the Jupyter Lab work. It tells you how much memory you're using. So if you run certain parts of the notebooks multiple times, or if you run multiple notebooks at the same time, you might find you fill up the memory that you've been allocated as a free user on the essential offer that you get as a when you just sign up to start with. So this might be the case of what's happened here. It could also be a problem with the Jupyter Lab in particular in this instance. So I would say get in touch with us and we can have a look in a bit more detail about what we can do to make sure you can run this.
Yes, thank you, Haley. I would like to add, just as a reminder, that there is an email address for the support@wekeo.eu, and also a form at the website. So you can, of course, contact us if for further help. So far, I think we do not have. Oh wait, sorry. We have just one more question related to the topics we're talking about. So I'm gonna show you this question now before we move on. So there is about this kernel restart. We have another question or another comment. The environment for kernel restart is in the WEkEO dashboard on the web browser.
Yes, this is this response you get when you if you're running the Jupyter Lab from the WEkEO browser, which is I think what our participant here is doing. You sometimes get this message that the kernel needs to restart, and this usually is triggered by a memory problem. If you shut it down and give it a bit of time and then restart it, you will get a fresh spawn of the Jupyter Lab environment to use. But you can cause this problem repeatedly depending on what you're doing in terms of the memory. Like I say, I think it's useful to have a look at the specific instance that somebody's using here just to check what's going on. So I would encourage Carrie to contact us and we can have a look in more detail for you to see what's happening.
And please, when you write to us, include as much information as possible so that we can reproduce the error and see if it is a memory thing, which should be a normal thing that can happen, or if there is a certain issue that we need to fix. So the user you're accessing with, right, Marta, can you maybe highlight the fields that we are usually asking for through the support when we try to replicate any of these issues? Should be the
sorry, I don't understand which.
That users should tell us the user account they're accessing with,
exactly.
the browser they're accessing with, like anything, any screenshots, anything that can help us reproduce the issue to isolate whether it is an actual issue or it is a memory problem that can be solved in a different way.
Exactly, I agree, Laia, that as you were saying, both as much information, the more information, the better, and as much information as you can give, the more quickly we can solve the problems, or more specifically with more details, the type of data set and the browser is set, the account, because it might be a problem very specific for one account, it might be something more general. So I completely agree with you, Laia, that this is always very useful to include it. So we have some more questions. And we have a message that appeared from the API. I'm not sure if it's worth it to show it now. I can just show it now. And if you think it's too much detail, we can just forward it to the support, to the WEkEO support. So this is the message that one of the users got from while trying to download the data from the API. Is this common? Is it something more for the support?
In this case, it would be good to know what data set the user is trying to reach. Usually, this can be either an HDA error, or sometimes there can be an error coming from the original data source. If we are checking on a particular field that is coming from the original data source. This looks pretty much like HDA, but I would need more information to know for sure. Haley, have you got anything to add?
For this one, I would say potentially it could be a couple of things. Either genuinely there's been a break, a short term in the service, which can happen. We usually try and communicate that if that's going to be a longer time period, but try it and run it again. That will tell you if it's something that's temporary. Otherwise, I guess it could be an error in the formulation of something within the JSON files, for example. I mean, it says here an error in the application, but yeah, hard to know without looking in more detail at the query itself to see if there's more a problem. Sometimes these errors have multiple kind of layers to them, so good one.
If you can give us more information, we can look into it. It can happen that there is a problem with the harmonized data access server, which is not often, which is not something that happens often, but it could be. So if we get more information, we can actually look into it, or maybe it is a problem in the queries, or something is missing, maybe. So.
Okay, thank you. So as we were saying, like the more information, the more details about the data sets you're trying to access, it's the better. We have another question that is more general, and it's the following. So sorry, moment here. Some applications require enhanced geolocation accuracy of satellite optical data. Is there a method or application approach that you can recommend for batch applications?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this, although it depends a bit on exactly which data stream you're looking at. I'm presuming either Sentinel-2 or Sentinel-3. I'm aware that there are some existing methods for going from level 1 to level 2 that can be used and have been used historically for the geolocation. In particular in Snap and what was in Beam. These were developed primarily, I think, for the Meris era. I used to use these myself when we were looking at coastal areas. So you can explore some of those. In more detail, I don't know if there's many sort of general approaches available out there, but there's certainly going to be a lot of customized ones out there. So I would suggest this would be another good one for the help desk. If you send a request about this one, I can have a look at some of the latest and we can discuss the particular data that you're interested in. And see what would be the best match for your particular use case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Haley, for your explanations, for your time, your presentation. We are going to switch now to the next presenter. And I'm gonna also, maybe Laia will join us later, and Haley, of course, if you can help us with more questions. So let's switch to the presentation now. Okay, right now I'm going to introduce you to Joanna Miguens. Hello, Joanna. Good morning.
Hi, hello, everyone. It's nice to join you here on the session. I'm very happy to come here to chat a little bit more with you on the follow-up questions from the last session And here on the cloud processing environment Q&A session, we try to come up with most of the common questions that the users have when they start using the WEkEO environment. And we picked up one of the questions from last session because we feel it's quite representative from our experience when we work with users that are just trying to migrate their workloads to WEkEO, or they are just starting to work with our observation data and they want to know how do they typically work with WEkEO, so with the virtual machines and with the access. So Marta, if you can come up to the next slide now. Yeah, so the question is, how can we access the data that has been processed in the virtual environment for local use? So this is really a very good question, and typically everyone asks this. So how do I access the environment, either to work on it or to download the data to your local environment and use it as you wish? So typically your computer environment will have virtual machines and your workloads there, right? And this is a secured environment where you have a platform as a service. So it's basically reproducing what you have locally, but on the cloud. And to access this, there are different ways to access your results from your environment. And the most typical one, it is to access it through the command line. So if we come up to the next slide. Yeah. So from your local environment, the most common one is to access the command line. You can access the environment and you can download, copy across the results. So for example, with SSH. There are, of course, other ways, depending what you are trying to do. For example, in WEkEO, you can also use object storage. In object storage has a particular use for more unstructured and huge amounts of data, which is very quickly. And there is also this offer on WEkEO. Another way that you can actually use, if you have your virtual environment, you may have your own applications running on it. So you can provide your own services. You have your own portal to your own users, and there you can transfer the data as you wish, as you have admin rights. So your admin rights, you can install different types of servers, FTP, HTTP servers. So there are actually numerous possibilities. If we go now to the next slide. So here we have some of the typical ways of using. Let's say here on the top, it's the command line. So it pretty looks like you are in your own laptop. You type through the command line exactly as in your local Linux workstation. And what you have also is your own GUI. If you see here on the left down, you manage the whole environment through the GUI. And as you have full access to it, you can also have install a desktop on your environment. So all this, it's described on our documentation. So if you go to the WEkEO website, so www.wekeo.eu, and you go to docs. Under there are the guides where you can actually see how to use these three types to access the data on WEkEO. So I hope this helped to you to understand how you can get the files out of the WEkEO after processing it.
Okay. Thank you, Joanna. I think it will be very useful for everyone that has started to try it, and also for the people that haven't started yet, but they will take a look, try it, and maybe they find some problems, some questions. They can have the recording available later and just go back to what you just explained. So right now we can continue with some more questions that are being asked in the chat. I'm going to switch the mode for the Q&A part. And this is the last question we had before. And first, now I'm going to add Laia again to the conversation. And if necessary, we will also ask Haley to be back here with us. Hi, Laia, can you hear us?
Yes. Hello,
Okay.
Marta and Joanna.
Perfect. So we continue with some questions. Right now, I cannot see something very specific to the cloud itself, but we have some more questions related to data and not Jupyter notebooks or in WEkEO in general. So maybe you can try to answer them. One is this one about the innovative governances after COVID-19 of infrastructures via ocean, satellite, and by satellites and by space. So I don't know if you can have if you have already some information about it or.
Regarding COVID-19, and I'm not sure this, I do not think this answers the question, but maybe complements a bit the information we opened. We opened the possibility for users to submit their needs for research activities related to COVID-19 projects, and we have been giving out grants for the use of resources at no cost in WEkEO for projects that have to do with this specific topic. I don't know if Joanna wants to add something.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. So there are actually no limitations. What is actually, it's more offer. So we grew up the offer. There are more free access to the resources if there are projects on COVID-19. So this came from the European Commission that approached us to offer this to the users, as it's definitely a huge concern currently in our society to all of us. And on WEkEO, you can have access to computing resources for a longer time for free, and having all this support that we give to the users through our help desk and so on to work on this and bring more information through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to add that usually when we have these changes or these new opportunities, apart from, of course, getting more information of the user support directly if you want, there is information on the website with news that are being updated often, that you can also find, where you can also find what Laia and Joanna just explained. So let's move to the next question. It is specific for data. So one of the users asks about a challenge while downloading some problems, I suppose, while downloading reanalysis data. I suppose that's a mistake. I suppose that might be referring to ERA 5. I don't know if you know something about this this data or what the user is trying to ask.
The user is talking about two different data sets. One is two different data. I don't know the actual data set. One is on ERA 5 reanalysis. Different options, different data sets are available within this category. So we should, if the participant can add more information to this question, would be great. And the other one is the Sentinel-1 data that is also available in different ways, as SLCs, as GRDs, and is available from two different providers. So we would need a bit more of information. Also, if you are accessing it online through the data viewer or through the Jupyter Notebook, because here online using Python directly, I guess it's a Jupyter Notebook, but it's not clear enough.
Yes, if it helps, we have some more clarification. So the question is how to download the ERA 5, I suppose ERA 5, reanalysis using the API with Sentinel-1. So I don't know if it helps as a clarification, otherwise.
Maybe, Marta, we can share the screen and show from the data viewer how you, like the different possibilities on the data sets and how a Python query is built for a data set. I don't know, Joanna, if you have another idea.
That's a very good idea. Yeah, I was actually thinking about the same. I think that can also help other users to see how do we generate a request for data.
Okay, would you like to do it? Would you like me to do that? Or, I mean, I think you can all share your screen, so.
Let me check. Okay, I will try. Do you see the data viewer?
Yes, it's
Yes.
now on the screen.
Okay. So I am removing the layers. If I add a layer for, let's see, ERA 5, or let me do this, because ERA, you said ECMWF. Okay, so for instance, the ERA 5 hourly variables and pressure levels, we can add this to the map. This data set cannot be viewed, but it can be downloaded. You need to be signed in. Okay. You need to check the actual variable that you're interested in the different attributes for your query. I'm just doing this as an example, and we can show the API request. So for this data set, this is an API request that you can copy paste, and you will see the actual values that you have clicked on the user interface, on the graphical user interface here. You can copy paste this query and into your Jupyter environment on your Python code and use it to access the data. This would be a way. You can do the same with the different, also with the Sentinel-1. For Sentinel-1, as we were saying, there are different possibilities, SLCs and GRDs. If we go for the GRD, for instance, this one is visible on the map, so you can view it, and you can also do the same thing. You need to zoom in to view it. When we share the screen, it's always a bit slow, but when you do it on your computer, it will be much faster. Okay. And yeah, you have the different layers here. You can do the same. When you click on the download, the loading layer metadata is connecting to the HDA. You can draw an area of interest and copy it. You can use the variables from the graphical user interface, same thing, and you get the API request. In this case, because we did the bounding box, we draw it on the map, but you can use your own. This is just an example to understand the logic behind the HDA API queries, which are the same ones that you would use from a Jupyter notebook to access the WEkEO data. I don't know if this clarifies, Marta?
Yes, like I think this was a very useful demo, and it makes it clear that to understand the different data sets available. So thank you very much for that. We are almost to the end of this session, so I would like to encourage everyone that has still some more questions, some more doubts, take the chance now to ask them, because we can right now, before we close, to end this this webinar, to have the opportunity to answer them. Otherwise, you can always send your messages or your questions or comments to the user support. We have one more.
Yeah, I see there is a question on Moto.
Exactly. So this graphical user interface that you show, the data from there, is it available via Moto Client?
The Moto Client is an application that is actually from the CMEMS, from the Copernicus Marine Service, and all the data that is available through WEkEO that comes from CMEMS is available through Moto in the same way. But in WEkEO there is other data that is not available through Moto. Moto is not part of the WEkEO solution. Like WEkEO users do not need to handle Moto if they are not using it and they want to use it anyway. I mean, you don't need to worry about it if you are using WEkEO. For those that are actually users of CMEMS and are using Moto Client, yes, you can access the CMEMS data in the same way, because WEkEO is talking to Moto internally through the HDA. But it only applies to CMEMS data.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Laia. So we are now at the end. I cannot see more questions. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, all of you, all the WEkEO experts that have explained and given more details about the functionalities. Thank you, Joanna, Laia, Haley, and also Amin and Fabrice that are in the also answering questions and are also giving information through the chat. And especially thank you to all the participants, because you made a very interesting session with all your questions. So, and remember that you can contact us, and we will have upcoming trainings. The next one will be focused on atmospheric data, and the date will be announced soon. It will probably be scheduled for October, but it's not the day is not clear yet. So we will give you more information about it as soon as we know it. And I think that's all from my side and from our side. So thank you very much to everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.